Is it fatigue or burnout if I spent 2 weeks doing absolutely nothing but sleeping and lounging, and then spent a weekend at all-inclusive where I slept and tanned, and then I came back and I'm still tired and done?
Those are good questions, right? Fatigue or burnout. And, I think I also wonder how listeners might be hearing that too, because some people might, and there's a third option that we sometimes use.
Lazy. I would not consider myself lazy. No. I get all my stuff done. I'm done,
Right. But then I wonder, like, how many times you've wondered, like, am I just being lazy? Because like even yesterday, you sort of like,
I spent most of yesterday in bed with the covers over my head, scrolling. And I was like, I need to stop scrolling. However, I don't have the energy to do anything else.
Right. Well, and I think, for me, this is something that I can recognize in other people. So we're talking specifically about burnout today. And I don't think oftentimes we recognize it in ourselves very often because we're in the midst of it and it feels, and we have all these other words for it too, right? I'm so tired. I'm overwhelmed. I'm, feeling lazy, whatever it is we say to ourselves. And so I think that there can be when you're in the midst of it, it can be difficult to recognize for yourself. So that's why having other people recognize it is helpful. So honestly, when I see that, and knowing both you and your brother who also went on vacation with us, and he just finished and graduated with his MBA.
And for reference, before these 3 weeks of wanting to do nothing, I was doing grad school, my practicum, a full-time job, and living life.
Right.
And whatever else.
Right. And also, with ending the academic year, even though you've got your summer that you're going into, you also had a pretty intense project at work because that virtual summit for both, it was great that we did this.
There were lots of all-nighters.
There was lots of all-nighters that we were doing. So I know the load that took. And so for me, when I'm seeing, to me, the difference is, are you sleeping? And if you're sleeping, and like I heard your brother was sleeping nonstop too, that then the exhaustion is real, but burnout is very distinct from exhaustion. And so when you are sleeping and you're not feeling rested afterwards, then you probably do need to be considering whether you are experiencing some burnout. Now, that doesn't mean you're, like after a long, hard project that a couple of days of rest, are you still able to wake up and feel, but you tire more easily? That means your body needs maybe more periods of rest. And so to me, when you took the couple of weeks and you're trying to rest, I tell all of my grad students, rest.
I also quit coffee. Yeah.
Well, and I think then, right, because using substances, caffeine, sugar, and other types of substances is oftentimes a way people are coping with burnout too, right? You got to keep going.
Mm-hmm. What is the triad of signs for burnout?
So typically we're going to be looking at specifically several things, right? So this chronic stress that leads to this overwhelming fatigue, right? So with that exhaustion that's with that. And then another part of it is this cynicism towards a specific system. So that's, I think, another thing that's going to be really important to distinguish it from something like depression, which is more of that's sort of global. In every context, you're feeling that way. Whereas this cynicism is usually about a particular thing. And so for students, That's typically, having more cynical attitudes towards school. And for typically we're seeing this more with adults, which is, and including young adults, towards work. So it's very specific to that context about I can't do this anymore. So you see yourself dreading going to school, showing up, doing what you need to do, or showing up to work. You find yourself sitting in the car longer, trying to hype yourself up to actually walk in.
There have been times, guys.
Yes. And so I think that's important for people to recognize some of this because, again, there are interventions that we can do for this, but the first thing to do is recognizing it. And like I said, I think burnout is one of the more difficult things, or at least for me, that I've when I would say I've experienced it maybe 2 or 3 times in my life, that it's one of those things that it's like looking back, but it's like after I have done some things to address what's happening. So that overwhelming exhaustion and then that cynical sort of view towards that system. And then one of the big things is feeling ineffective. So like what you're doing isn't working. It doesn't matter. And like you're never going to get it done. It's never going to be good enough. All of those types of things can come to play in that feeling sort of pervasively ineffective in what you're doing. And so those are, there's a lot of other things that can go into it, but those are typically the 3 primary things that most of the elements of burnout will fall into. Those are some of the primary things that you may see or experience with burnout. And like I said, you're usually seeing these happening within the context of a particular system. So usually we consider this more of a systems issue and not an individual issue.
So you're not just burnt out. You're burnt out at work or you're burnt out at school.
Typically. Or it could be, we see athletes sometimes, right? And so what's typically happening in those situations is you're again dealing with usually one of 3 things. The workload is overwhelming. Like it's a workload that is not sustainable for that individual person. And so there's that element. The other thing is a lot of times we'll see a lack of clear expectations. And sometimes with that, maybe a lack of communication. And so they're doing the things, and sometimes it might feel like they're spinning their wheels with that, but they're not quite certain what exactly needs to be done. And so a lot of times what's also happening in that same time, along with that, is that third element, is there's low social supports. And that doesn't mean that the individual has no social supports. What it means is within the context of that system that they're trying to function. So if it is at work or if it is at school or the sport, they may not feel that they have the social supports that are needed. And so a lot of times they feel like they're operating in isolation. Like it's all on them to do these things instead of, when you think in terms of, teamwork and, having a group that is equally distributing the weight, equally held accountable, it's not all resting on one person, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. How have we seen a shift between Gen Z burnout and older generations burnout?
Well, that is a really good question because one of the things we know about Gen Z and Gen X specifically.
We quit, we're done, we're out, we take our time off, we do only what we have to. They do above and beyond everything under the sun. If they're not doing something, they're underperforming.
Right. So we take into consideration these cultural aspects, right? These generational cultural things. I mean, in Gen X, we grind, we do the things. And I think for many of us, and we see this even in some of when you look at leadership literature, or when I'm reading some of the different information about generational types of things, it's like Gen X, and we could probably even say in that some of the boomers and millennials to some extent, but Gen X is sort of known for, they do the things. And almost to the point, though, with Gen X, in my generation, which is...
It's overkill.
We do it like the busyness or the, all of these things. We do it almost like as like a badge of honor. Try to like...
we're not impressed.
I know. Your generation is so different.
Impressed.
Gen Z is not impressed.
Why would you want to do all that?
And because you're
not... Okay... Because in most circumstances, you're not getting paid any extra to do all that. So why are you doing all that? That's how we see it.
Right.
Why are you not living life?
But some of us, and you and I have had this, like some of us like personal missions, like the impact that I want to have on the world.
You can have an impact and still live your life.
Yeah, but part of living your life is doing the things.
Yeah. Work is technically a part of your life. However, there is an outside life too that you should also be living.
Yes, I agree. And I will say this, do think this is one of the things that I admire about the Gen Z, even though I may at moments get aggravated, with some things, like show up for work. Like, I don't get how, yeah, I mean,
listen, okay, if you tell a Gen Z, make your own schedule.
Yeah, apparently this is not working out for me. I need to learn to manage this a little bit better. Like, and I'm okay, but see, that's it. I'm a very flexible person.
See, you're flexible. I'm flexible. Just tell me when I gotta be here. Otherwise, I can do everything on my laptop at home.
Yeah, and I don't care where you do it. I just want to see outcomes. I want to see things like just, and I wasn't talking specifically you. I know you took that. But that's something that I've, as I've worked with a variety of different employees of that, it's almost like, and I don't know why but it reminds me of this conversation I had when I was facilitating a group for a sorority. And it's sort of like, we were talking about like, what do you mean? Don't you just like go to lunch, meet up? And like, well, and then it's sort of and they were like, well, no, like they can't just walk into the cafeteria and go to a table. Like, I'm like, okay, well, don't you have like group chats? Like, meet me at and then it evolved into this whole like, well, yeah, but I don't know if it's in the group chat, if they really want me to be there. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So it's just dawning on me now.
That's a lot. That's crazy.
I'm telling you, it was for real. And several people
just show up.
Well, that's what I thought. But it's almost like people like need a personal invitation and conversation for each and every event and time that I would like people to come to work. Like, how does this? And this might be a whole different topic.
I'm thinking because there's for sure times where I'm like, someone's been like, oh, I'm going to go do this tonight. And they tell me, and then it's like, okay, cool. And I'm like, okay, but am I invited? Because like there was no technical invite and there wasn't like, we should go do this. It was just like, this is what I'm doing.
But is that a conversation? Like somebody is telling you that verbally? Exactly. Because that's different.
Sometimes, no, but sometimes people are like, this is your invite.
Oh, see, if it was something verbally said to me, then I'd be like, because I would be the same way. I would be like, I don't know if they're just telling me and they're going to go off and do that or if I'm invited. Yeah. So I might have like, so did you want company or what? So I might ask a clarifying question. Like, that sounds cool. Can I crash too? Whatever. I know that's not like the wording you guys use, but whatever. Versus if it's in a group chat, then know which group chat. And that is open for anyone to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. It is very common, especially amongst girls, that even if you're in a group chat, there's usually one person in the group chat that the rest of them don't typically like.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. I don't get it.
Okay, so maybe we need to do a whole other session.
I am probably that person. However, I don't care.
You don't care. You're still going to show up if you want to go.
If I want to go.
So bring this back to burnout, though.
Yeah.
Is that I think what's happening is that at school or work, they're not in the group chat. They're not having that support, that saying, hey, do you want to join us for lunch, or what have you. Or maybe they do, but it's not. But could
also turn into social burnout. Like this constant having to guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think with everything, like one thing, this is everything, right? Even with mental health, you can solve one problem and create another.
Yeah.
It's sort of like that, like plug in the hole with different things. Oh, like when you have a bucket with water and when you are plugging one hole, but another one comes out, then you plug that hole. But so you're trying to plug different holes, but it's still going to come out somewhere.
Okay. Yeah.
She's totally not getting my analogy, but I'm hoping some of our listeners totally get it. Or I'm just
It's like when you're hammering something into place and then the bottom half like jumps out of place and then you hammer that half in, but then the top half jumps back out of place.
Okay.
See, I don't get your analogies, you don't get mine.
Right. But basically you're trying to correct one problem
and it just starts a different one. And then it just keeps flip-flopping.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think we always have that, I think, with all things, and so that's why I think balance in and of itself is always difficult to achieve. But going back to burnout, this is what we're looking at. Like this is sort of the things that we would be sort of when we look at the definition of what burnout is, but then also the context in which it happens. And so then we have to look at what are some of the different symptoms. How does this show up? How does the individual experience this?
Yeah.
So what would you say that you've noticed?
I experience burnout.
Right. And we can see lots of things like emotional, cognitive, physical.
Cognitive, my brain does not function.
Okay. So what happens when
especially when I'm doing homework, I can't read. Mm-hmm. Like I'll read things and it just won't stick.
So difficulty focus or comprehending?
Comprehension.
Mm-hmm. And difficulty concentrating. Those are all common.
I sweat.
So a physical response.
Yes. Let's see. What else? There's more.
You have an eye twitch too.
I do have an eye twitch. I haven't experienced that lately.
Right.
Right. That's surprising.
Probably as you've been coming off of the chronic stress and healing.
It hasn't happened in like 6 months. That's surprising.
Oh, I thought you were saying your eye twitched a few weeks ago.
It was the other eye. That one was weird because it's never this eye. It's always this eye.
So you did have eye twitch. It just switched up which eye.
That's not usual though. That was the first time that ever happened.
Okay.
Anyways, what else? I get tired. I get cranky.
Mm-hmm. So that
don't talk to me.
The fatigue. You don't want to engage in relationships and social interaction. So don't talk to me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I do, just not with like a lot of people, and not with my parents.
Of course not.
I'll go hang out with one friend.
Right.
What else? Tired. Did I ever say tired? I drink a lot of coffee. Mm-hmm. I've stopped drinking coffee, guys.
So you increased your use of caffeine?
Yeah. I think that's it.
I think, well, I don't know about you specifically. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we all might experience or show some different symptoms at different times. So emotionally, we're going to probably see the irritability, a lot of times emotional numbness, like just not caring.
I do that one too.
Mm-hmm. Feeling like you cannot get the energy to do what needs to be done.
That too.
So there's the avoidance, right?
Is that avoidance?
I don't know. If you can't get the energy up to do it and do so.
But here's the thing. If you're trying,
but does it get done? right? Because again, you start to become less effective. So if you think about the athlete who's been overtraining, right, to get better and what have you, and then they actually start to become less effective, and you start to see, and sometimes we'll see this with athletes, they call it a slump or something, and it could just be they're off their game, or it could be are they overtraining? Is the mental load so much and they have not had enough of the physical and emotional rest in between to, so
But
is it
then
burnout?
they continue to try and work harder to improve again, but then that just makes them slower and slower. So is it avoidance if they're trying, but it's not working?
Well, I think if they're still trying, but then what happens when people just quit?
Yeah.
And this is what we see a lot of
Have
times,
not been
especially
there.
from school, or jobs, and sometimes it's done in a way because they recognize that is, they just can't do it anymore. And you'll start to hear things like, I can't keep doing what I'm doing. But sometimes you feel like you have no choice. Another area we see this a lot is caregiving. So burnout with caregiving, because it's around the clock, especially if you have a special needs child, or if there is
Multiple young ones.
Multiple young ones, you have so multiple children who all need that. We also see this with adults who are caring for parents or siblings or adult children who have special needs. And so I think that's another big part of burnout, which can be a little bit different sometimes for
you can't
students.
Just quit.
You can't just quit.
You
right?
don't have an option.
You don't have an option. A lot of times K-12 school, you can't, for most people, they can't just quit. It's not an option. And they just have to keep powering through it. And then a lot of times with jobs, it makes sense to sometimes just quit, but not everybody has that ability. It's, if you have bills that must be paid, if you have health benefits, a lot of times those are some of those aspects that the options, they're scary. And some, from a mental health, from a therapy point, sometimes some of that work that we have to do is having that discussion about, okay, what is the bare minimum, right? Because, and I've done this recently, okay, this is what my bills are. This is what we have to have. Hold on a second. If we completely pared back, what is the bare minimum? And so sometimes we have this is what we have, and I have to keep bringing in what I currently have. But then if we're looking at, because part of the work we have to do is, what is your overall physical, emotional capacity to do what you're being expected to do? And some of the work is even before that. Are you doing what's expected to do, or have you made more stuff up for yourself to do?
And that is a Gen X and Boomer thing.
It could be. I think what I hear from others is it's not just us. And I also think from my experiences, while some of it could be internally and self-imposed, almost always, if we're talking workload capacity, the clients I've worked with, and even some of my experiences, have been the requests for additional supports and helps, and reduced workloads are not an option. And sometimes things are very project specific, but projects can take a year or 2 years, and that's a long time to sustain that level of energy, cognitive focus, and things like that. So it is possible that it is an individual in how they're perceiving their workload, but that then goes to the second part of that systemic issue, which we talked about, is unclear expectations and communication. And then also that third part, which is feeling that sense of isolation within that. So where is the team to say, okay, hold on, let's divvy these different things up? And to even notice, because like I said, sometimes it's really hard for the individual themselves to recognize burnout because we tend to internalize it as I'm not doing enough. I can't get it done. I can't get things done as quickly as I used to, right? Mm-hmm. And so they internalize it sometimes as, hey, it's me, I'm the problem. And why can't I just get my act together? And why can't I? Well, and so some of the work is like, is it realistic to get through 100 emails a day on top of your 6 hours of nonstop meetings, on top of the 3 hours of project, on top of, you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes it's like peeling back to what is realistic. So looking at workload, and that's how those three things combine: the workload, the clear expectations and communication, and that sense of isolation or versus, being a part of a team that's a shared workload.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember how we got to that.
Well, I think the conversation started off with the difference between Gen Z and Gen X burnout, and then we somehow spiraled into that.
Oh, because but I'm hearing Gen Z burning out at high rates too. So they are experiencing this.
I think the statistic was 40% of Gen Z workers experience symptoms of depression and anxiety in the workplace.
Yes. And so, but again, I think depression and anxiety are global. So they're experiencing it in the workplace, but also likely experiencing it in their relationships, schools, and so forth. So that thing will have to sort of differentiate a little bit. But it's always important, I think, when you, especially when I'm dealing with depression, I might look at overall like burnout, fatigue, things like that. Anxiety, a little bit less because that's more about worries and fears and so forth. But there is a connection with the burnout, with anxiety in the sense of, what are you worried about if that doesn't get done?
Were you worried about, am I doing enough?
Mm-hmm. What will happen? Right. So that these mental health issues do come into play with burnout. And so you have to distinguish what those are. Now, the World Health Organization has included burnout in its categorizations, but it's not a diagnostics, criteria. But that is something that certainly, while I cannot do burnout from a, or even chronic stress as a reimbursable treatment for insurance to pay for mental health, right? Like that's a whole nother thing. Like, why does my insurance cover this? Well, insurance will typically cover these diagnoses of depression or anxiety, but it's not going to cover chronic stress or burnout or what have you. So, but we have to tease those out and sort of see what all they are, because there is the overlap with them. And the thing is, I can treat somebody for anxiety or depression all day long, but if we do not address
the burnout,
the system, right? So if I'm dealing with somebody who is at work and finds the work just fine, but is caring for an elderly parent, that is not, I can treat depression all day long, but until we address those types of things. And so what we do is we try to work on stress management, because if we can, so now we're talking about some interventions for
burnout.
Yeah. So interventions for burnout would include things like anything with stress management. So because we all have stressors, but how we experiencing those. But again, burnout is the chronic stress and usually is related to unrealistic overloads, workloads and so forth. So then we try to look at what are they capable of doing and what additional supports might be needed and so forth. The thing with burnout is something has to give. Something has to change.
Otherwise, it will all burn down.
It will all burn down, right? There's no amount of pep talking your way through it. There's no amount of mindfulness, Zen, Aums, that is going to sustain that level of chronic stress for the long term. And the other reason this can become so detrimental is we know the correlation between sustaining long-term chronic stress and its equivalent correlation with adverse health outcomes.
In human terms,
the
higher the stress levels, the more likely you are to have health issues.
Yes. Thank you for putting that in human terms. And so, so we can all sustain levels of stress. Mm-hmm. Each of us have different capacities for stress.
But when it goes all the way up and it stays all the way up,
and there's no ability for it to come down, mm-hmm. and there's no end in sight. I think that's the biggest thing is most people, they see there's no end in sight. This is never going to change. Mm-hmm. And so that then leads to those feelings of nothing I do is going to matter. Like nothing will change. It's going to keep being like this. And so they feel like they have no control over the situation. Mm-hmm. And so that leads to that feeling not very effective. Like, something I could do. It's always going to be like this.
Mm-hmm. So what are some things that you typically recommend to people who are experiencing burnout?
So what I would typically recommend, we sort of have to peel back the layers, what's happening. I like to look at what their values are, right? Because a lot of times we'll see that there is a misalignment with what they are doing and how they are spending their time and energies with what's important to them. Mm-hmm. And so we'll need to take a look at what's important to them. What do they want it to look like? And what is within their control to adjust the things. So most people I know, like they love what they're doing or they did. And they don't want to walk away from it yet, whether that's being the sport or the school or the job. They just don't know how to keep going. And so a lot of times we're looking at what's important to them, what their values, what they can do. And then a lot of times we'll even break it down into smaller things. What do you love doing? What is like sort of this meh, okay, I can do this, it doesn't. And what drained you? What is your hell?
She asks me that frequently.
Y'all, like, and I practice what I preach too.
And let me tell you, when I tell her my hell is constant website buildings, and then she just gives me constant websites to build.
Oh, I'm helping.
Those are all taken care of now, but there was times.
There was times. And we are also...
And there are times that you're going to have to do your constant hell.
You are. And, but one of the things I've built in, and by the way, we have a meeting next week with the team.
Wow. I was left out on that email.
No, it hasn't gone out yet.
Okay.
We're trying to find the exact time. I knew your schedule was a little bit more flexible, but it should maybe come this evening or tomorrow. We're looking at getting the date down. So, but that's what I want to do is as a business owner, as a leader, as somebody who cares deeply about her team and that the jobs that they're doing for the most part are one aligned with the business or, the vision for the business and our mission of what we do. But then also, what do they want to do and what do they want to bring? Because most of us, if we feel like we get to do our things we love.
And that's how this podcast came about.
This is a year ago. And so we can do that. But I also, so that's what I would do with them. And it's, so I have this activity that I tend to do. And like I said, I did this a few months ago.
She did.
I did. And actually, your brother and your dad got involved.
Yeah, I was not here.
She was not here. You are normally the one who was here.
It was like a Saturday.
It was a Saturday.
And I was doing something. I don't know.
And I just knew where I was at. And I'm like, I need to really sit down
she
and
just put a bunch of sticky notes on the back of the door. Here's what I love doing. Here's meh. And here, absolutely not.
I hate it. Like this
She wrote out every one of her jobs, all of her projects.
And it's not just not the job title, but this, what are the things that I'm consistently having to spend my time doing? Oh yeah, taxes, tasks. Yes. Tasks.
I'm having trouble with that one.
And so we talked about, and I'm like, taxes, yes.
That too. That was in hell. However, she had to do them because it was around taxes time.
It was around time. So this is probably in March. Like what's going on with me and where am I at? And as I try to look at some things and what is it I love doing? Mm-hmm. And that's always going to be, it did not surprise me, teaching, training, supervising, those kinds of things.
Surprisingly,
this actually was, I love it, which I did not think I was going to. And, because it's sort of fun getting to spend time with you and to see what you do with it, right? Like
she started this just to appease me and now she loves it.
I love it. It's been fun. And I hope helpful to others. Mm-hmm. I've heard a lot of good feedback from others. I mean, we get our comments occasionally, but that's okay. We don't have to be everybody's cup of tea. We just want to be the cup of tea for the people who want it.
Anyways.
So that's what I will often do that. Mm-hmm. In fact, I probably just need to make this into a worksheet and PDF because I use a lot of blank copy paper for a lot of things. I find myself redoing the same things over and over again. And so, I even do this for myself. So I'll give you an example. And I know this is primarily working with younger, we typically are dealing with 12 to 29-year-olds and parenting them. But I think a lot of times people who are parenting them are also dealing with what we call the sandwich generation. So they're also caring for older parents. So I don't have an example with younger kids right now off the top of my head, but I do this a lot with my adult clients who are also in caregiving roles for their parents, aging parents. And so we'll talk about so when you think about being their child, right? What are the things you're like, yes, I love doing these things because they're my parent and I want to be this daughter to them. And that's what I love doing. And I want to keep doing these things. Okay. And then what are the things these are okay? I don't mind doing these things. And then what are the no, absolutely this. And so we do that. And then what we're able to do is, and I know your generation is really big on the word boundaries.
We're good at saying, I was going to say we're good at saying no. However, we're not good at saying no. That's really? A whole different topic.
That's a whole different topic. Ooh, we should do a topic on saying no.
I think a lot of my generation is people pleasers. However, they have the boundaries. They do. So it's weird. Anyways.
I think people are either good at boundaries or not good at boundaries. I don't see it that way. I think we're good at some things.
I think we're good at saying this is the boundary. However, I think there's always that.
Well, there's always, you got to leave yourself some lee room in there too. But I also, I just don't think it's as cut and dry. And for anyone who maybe is more cut and dry, either they've gotten really clear on their values and what they will and won't do, or they are maybe just more selfish. And that's not always a bad thing. But anyway, so that's the example I would say that I use most, a situation I use most frequently with that, because I do know the more that they are doing in that caregiving role, the more that they are doing in that sort of what they've identified as sort of their please don't, that's sort of hell for me to do, that the more they do that, that's when the chronic stress. And then typically what I'm seeing is then they develop their own health issues and are having to be treated. And it's a whole vicious cycle. And so we usually are looking at how do you get what can we put in place? And a lot of times that's where other people, they don't think that they can access supports, And so we can then start looking at what other helps are available, whether that's maybe other siblings or other services that are available to help with those. And that's what I would say in almost anything is how do we divvy that up? Because this is what I think people struggle with when they're in burnout, in no matter which situation they're in, is they still love something about it.
Mm-hmm.
They love the sport. They want to get an education. They love the job.
They wouldn't be there that long if they did.
They wouldn't. It's too easy to walk away, right?
In most cases.
In many cases. And so there's still something they love about it. They're in so deep that they don't feel like they have any say or control over it. And so then when they do that, then you can start looking at, okay, do you have any control over it? It's a little bit less likely sometimes in a lot of work situations. I have found that they have negotiated those conversations or tried to navigated the conversations, and it's not been received in a way that there's any response to solve those issues, or the way that they were solved, made them look like they were being needy or unworkable or, and I've heard this quite a bit too, and I've even experienced this. Well, yeah, but you're doing these other things. It's like, and so if you quit doing those, then you wouldn't feel so bad. And then it's like,
if I quit doing those, I would feel worse.
Right. Because what they don't realize, like the things that they want to take away. And this happens a lot, right? So if you're a boss out there, listen to some of these things, because then they're asking you
these other
to
things
stop
I'm
doing
doing,
these things that are actually
I enjoy.
in your head. Exactly. Those are like in the heaven, like these are the things I love doing.
So you're asking me to stop doing all the things I love doing and do all the things I absolutely despise doing.
Which is going to, and not even despise. It's, some of those things have to be done. And most everybody I know, they're like, it's reasonable. Like, I have to do some of these things, but it's either the amount of time or the depth of the issue. Right. So, caring for an aging parent is pretty easy. Most of us can. And it's like, they don't mind having to deal with some of the standard medical appointments and even the emergency. But when they're dealing with the wait, this is going to be needed sort of day in, day out, or multiple times a week, or this or that, that's when it becomes, more challenging. Again, this is about chronic and sustaining that level. So
this conversation's reminded me of when I quit color guard.
Oh,
yeah. That's all.
We don't have to get into it.
We can go into it.
Well, and but was there the emotional exhaustion, right?
Yeah, I stopped showing
fatigue?
at the practices.
Yeah.
I'd show up to the performance, but I wouldn't show up to practice.
And, I would say, and it's very possible it was burnout. I would also say that can be very different, right? Because burnout has other capacities to it or other elements. But there's also this group of people that I'm doing this with anymore, right? Because you're talking about activities. So it could be that the workload was so much and that the expectations, unclear communication versus, nope, the people that I'm doing this with, they're just not a fit. Or the amount of time that I'm putting into this, I'm not getting the reward out of it.
I think it was all of the above.
Yeah. Versus the workload capacity and the chronic ongoing stress, because that also wasn't a year-round thing. You know,
but it was hell.
And that's okay. But I think
but here's my thing. I had 1 year left. I quit my senior year.
But there were some other elements to that.
After 3 years of hell.
I also think
it was
you had moments
year.
where it was good, and they were interspersed in there, and then there were just enough that and so, but I think that this is very different than burnout, because watching you going through that, and I don't know everything, so maybe it was, I would wonder, I would not see it as burnout so much because of the ongoing physical fatigue. And I mean, that was specific to that. That was not because of everything you were doing. I think it was more fed up and you were done. And I think those are very different than burnout. I think people can be like, and again, you're looking at some very similar things, right? Like, just like burnout can also involve depression and anxiety, but it doesn't have to. I think burnout can include, will definitely include being fed up a lot of times. But I don't, and there's probably better words than fed up. It's just sort of what is coming to my mind. But I also think there's some situations that we can be fed up with that we choose to leave because of certain things. And that's context specific. But I don't think everybody who is fed up and chooses to leave an activity or a job or a school has experienced burnout.
Okay.
But most people who've experienced burnout have experienced being fed up, if that makes sense.
Sure. It is, okay.
And it's very possible you did because you knew more internally what you were experiencing than what I was saying. Mm-hmm. So, I would probably say, looking back for myself, I can think of probably at least 4 distinct points in my life where I've experienced what I would say is burnout. But it might, like, it ended up, maybe it went on too long and it had to get to that really bad for me to even recognize it. And most of the time it's more of a reflective, like, yeah, I did probably reach that. What I would probably say, I'm going to use a word like clinical burnout, even though I don't know if clinical and burnout can go together, but I would definitely be treating somebody for that. But I don't know that when I was in the midst of it, that I recognized it as that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Is it easier for you to recognize burnout in people?
Yeah, I recognize it in you a lot.
Really?
You're saying 4 times. I'm saying maybe like twice a year.
Well, I think those are intense periods of stress, which is different than burnout.
Okay.
Oh, well, tell me more what you're meaning, what you see.
No. I'm done now. I'm done speaking.
I'll have to reflect on that.
I think you interpret burnout in a more significant way than I do.
That's what I'm wondering. Like,
you as a therapist, you're like, burnout has to be this big. And I'm like, burnout has to be this big.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I probably was not very good at recognizing burnout.
Exactly.
In the midst of it, it was just after these big, and probably where I made bigger life changes, because I got to the point it was not sustainable.
I don't think you have to make a major life choice because of burnout. I don't think burnout has to get to the point of being so significantly unsustainable. It can get to the point of, hey, this is a lot. I need to cut something. And you go through that about twice a year.
And I do. I'm always reevaluating, and I usually rebalance and cut things, but I do get overly stressed. You're right.
You get to the point of burnout.
Okay. I'm not saying I disagree. I'm thinking about it in different ways. But then do you also, like, I try to take the breaks when I can. But I would say that there's been some moments, and this is that other part, where it gets into some situations where there's never a break. Mm-hmm. And I think that's more difficult for me to come back. But yes, there are definitely seasonal times that I am way more stressed. Mm-hmm. And apparently I need to recognize the burnout symptoms versus I'm envisioning.
I think you underestimate your level of stress. I think you label it as very stressed. However, I think it is burnout.
Okay. I'm envisioning making some charts now for myself and like so I can recognize this sooner.
I don't know. I'm done. I've been told I'm wrong a few too many times back to back. So.
Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah.
And I'm saying this. No.
I'm saying, damn, I was burned out from color guard. You're like, no, you were just fed up.
I didn't mean it as no. I meant it as I'm wondering and the way I saw it. And even you, I'm not disagreeing with what you're seeing in me. I think it's interesting and it's making me think. And I'm going to be thinking more about this.
And maybe this is just a Gen Z thing because we call things burnout more. And you guys don't.
Right. And so here I am in my mind, y'all. I'm making these little visual things in my mind. It will be on a written like a plain piece of typing paper that I'll use unless she decides to make it pretty for me. If she does, we'll share it with you all if you request it. But yeah, at what point is, because I'm good at distinguishing between normal stress and chronic stress. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there are moments certainly that are very cyclic for me that it's just par for the course in academia that the chronic stress is more prevalent. And this is what I'm saying. I think that there is probably this time, this area where the chronic stress and the burnout overlaps that I don't recognize it as such until it gets so far over.
I think for you don't recognize burnout until you're done. Like, as in you're done with it. You're done for, like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right. Because I think for me, in each of those situations, what I've realized is nothing I say or do is going to affect the change that's needed. Like, I no longer have the autonomy or control to make the necessary changes to the load that's being expected. And like I said, any solutions that I've experienced, and again, with well-meaning, supervisors, I've had amazing supervisors, but the solutions have been, well, let's, while you're spending your time doing the things that you like, they're not like, do less of that, and then it won't be so bad. It's like, but no.
See, here's what I'm hearing is you wait until there's no way to move things around and make things more manageable. That's when you consider burnout. Whereas when you're talking to your clients, it's like, okay, what can we do less of that would reduce this so that you don't have to give it all up entirely?
I'm going to say that's possible, but I wonder if this goes to something that you haven't pointed out yet, which is sometimes I tend to be very optimistic.
You are very optimistic.
And I think...
And you give so many chances for so many different things.
And I think that's where...
And I think by chance 2, that's when burnout typically hits. However, you don't recognize it until like chance 7 or 8.
No, I'm going to keep trying, man. Like, if option B doesn't work, we're going to go to C, D, E, F. I got lots of different things.
But I think we see that the burnout starts to hit you at B.
Yes.
Once B fails?
Or at least by C, So
we see the burnout hit you. However, you're not acknowledging it until like F, G.
Because I'm going to keep trying, man.
Right.
We've talked about, I'm optimistic, I'm loyal, and mission focused. Like, we can do this.
So you're acknowledging that it's likely that you are burnt out more than you acknowledge.
I think that
you experience it more.
When I'm walking away, right? I know it's time for maybe some takeaways, which is I'm gonna think more about, the normal cyclical patterns between. I feel like I know what those are between the stress and the chronic stress, and I have good plans for that. I put in some good skills, but what I may not be as good at. Although I think in my most recent one, I was much quicker to make decisions than I have been, but that's all right.
One of my favorite things is that she'll be like, should I do this? And I'm like, yes. And then she'll ask someone else and they'll be like, yes. And she'll ask like 7 or 8 people and they'll all be like, yes. And she's like, I don't know, guys. And then she'll ask us again. Then she'll still be like, okay, but no. And then she'll ask us again. It goes on like 4 or 5 times. And then she finally is like, okay, yeah.
I mean, but those are usually pretty big things. And there's usually, remember, we talked about, like, a lot of people can't just always walk away. But anyway, we're all works in progress. And I will always be transparent that I am also a work in progress in many things. This is the first time I'm living this moment based on my past experiences and the situation that I'm in now, and I'm going to do the best that I can. And I think all of us do that. Like, that's what being human is. My dear Gen Z daughter who told me, like, maybe be human earlier in this episode.
I didn't tell you to be human. I told you to spoke human.
Oh, speak human.
Anyway.
Maybe I was reading something about be human before this, instead of trying to like be perfect, because perfectionism and the overlap and so forth.
There's no room for that.
So I do think that recognizing burnout is one of the most essential things that we can do for ourselves and the people around us. And I think the word burnout sometimes is just sort of a general, like even cliche, and what does it even mean? But
I'm starting to wonder that by the end of this.
But I do think that there are very specific symptoms, signs, and ways that we each need to be looking at that.
And I think they look differently in each person, and they affect each person differently.
Right.
Yes. That's what I'm coming to the conclusion of at the end of this.
Yes.
After our last conversation.
And so our listeners, they're going to look forward to some of these things that we're going to share with them. Oh, yeah, she's going to put this into a pretty PDF. Or not. Maybe not.
Maybe not. However,
we'll see.
I got things to do. Anyways.
She's still in grad school, y'all. We'll see if we can work this into an assignment for her.
Probably not.
Probably not. Not this one.
My takeaways. I don't know. Burnout's real. Take care of yourself. Yeah. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think for me, through this discussion with you, it is really looking at sort of what I would say the continuum.
I don't think burnout has to be big to be impactful.
Yes.
Yes.
And I need to.
So I think you should reevaluate.
I'm going to reevaluate. And not only that, like I do think it's very real, like, because we have so many other words for all these things. Because it doesn't always tick the boxes for depression or this or that. And some people are like, just take a rest. But when the rest isn't restful, that's when we know we have a problem. And so that's when we definitely need to be looking at this a little bit more closely.
Yeah. Cool.
All right.
Bye.